Get your filthy dope money out of my bank, you piece of trash. The words, sharp and venomous, sliced through the quiet hum of the Sterling Trust Bank. Tiffany Astor, a teller whose name tag was as polished as her contempt, swept her perfectly manicured hand across the cool marble counter. A tidal wave of cash, $950,000, cascaded onto the floor, a green and white river of someone's life's work. The bills, bundled neatly just moments before, scattered like fallen leaves in a hurricane. Elias Eli Vance watched the storm he hadn't created, his face a mask of impossible calm. 27 community-focused urban farms and grocery stores, 15 years of fighting food deserts, of building something from the dirt up, now lay strewn across the floor, trampled by the assumptions of a woman who saw his worn hoodie before she saw his soul. Tiffany's stiletto heel, a weapon of casual cruelty, found a $100 bill and pinned it to the marble. She twisted, grinding the face of Benjamin Franklin into the stone, her eyes locked on Eli's. The friction was a grinding, visceral sound in the suddenly silent bank. "This," she hissed, her voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, "is what I think of your dirty cash." Her colleague at the next station, a woman named Brenda, let out a snickering gasp. Frank, the weary security guard who had seen too much in his 60 years, took a hesitant step forward, his hand hovering near his hip. Across the lobby, smartphones began to rise like periscopes, their lenses hungry for the unfolding drama. Eli knelt. He didn't break eye contact with Tiffany, with a dignity that seemed to suck the very air out of the room. He began to gather each bill, his movements deliberate, his composure a silent, screaming indictment of the woman who had just made the single greatest mistake of her professional life. Before we dive into this insane story of prejudice, power, and the most epic corporate takedown you will ever hear, do me a favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to Blacktail Stories so you never miss an episode of justice served ice cold. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever been so disrespected, so utterly misjudged, that your entire world tilted on its axis? Comment below with a "hell yes" if you've ever felt that sting of prejudice. You are not alone. Let's get into it. The digital clock on the wall glowed with red finality. 4:48 p.m., 12 minutes until closing on a Friday in downtown Chicago. 12 minutes until the weekend, until freedom. For Tiffany and her manager, Robert Fletcher, it was a countdown to escape. For Eli, it was about to become a countdown to judgment. He had approached her window a quarter of an hour earlier, a sturdy briefcase in one hand, a leather-bound folder with all his documentation in the other. What should have been a 5-minute business deposit, a routine transaction he'd completed 100 times before, had detonated into a public spectacle of humiliation. "Sir, we don't process that kind of money here," Tiffany had announced, her voice dripping with a self-righteous authority she hadn't earned. She said, "That kind of money," as if it were crawling with disease. Eli had calmly placed his driver's license and his articles of incorporation on the counter. "It's legitimate business revenue," he'd stated, his voice even. "I have all the paperwork right here. It's from my grocery stores." Tiffany had picked up his ID as if it were contaminated, holding it between two acrylic-tipped fingers. She held it at arm's length, squinting theatrically as if the plastic itself offended her. "Right," she'd sneered. "Grocery stores. Dope money always comes with a good story." Brenda, her work bestie, had leaned over from the adjacent station. "Another one trying to wash his cash before the weekend?" she'd whispered, a stage whisper designed to carry. The two women had exchanged a look of shared, ugly superiority. It was them against the world, and today, Eli was the world. In a far corner of the bank, trying to remain invisible, 20-year-old Chloe Chang fumbled with her phone. A student at the Art Institute, she had come in to deposit the meager $87 in cash tips she'd earned from her barista job. Now, she'd stumbled into a masterclass in raw, unfiltered injustice. She instinctively opened her Instagram and hit Go Live. Her stream, usually reserved for art projects and pictures of her cat, showed only 32 followers at first. But the number was already starting to tick upward. "Y'all, you are not going to believe this," Chloe whispered into her phone's microphone, her heart pounding against her ribs. "This teller at Sterling Trust just threw this man's money, like a whole mountain of cash, all over the floor and called it drug money. To his face. It's happening right now." During the confrontation, Eli's wallet had slipped from his jacket pocket and fallen open on the floor. Chloe's camera, shaky as it was, caught a flash of what looked like an American Express Centurion card, the mythical Black Card. But the angle was wrong, to be certain. A sleek, unfamiliar car key fob with a minimalist silver logo peeked out from his pocket. But Tiffany wasn't looking at details. She was performing. "Large cash deposits," she announced, her voice rising to fill the space, "especially in small denominations, require manager approval due to suspected money laundering activities." She emphasized each word as if reading from a sacred text, a Bible of bigotry she had memorized. Her manager, Robert Fletcher, sat in his glass-walled office just 30 feet away. Everyone in the lobby could see him. And everyone could see the game of solitaire glowing on his computer screen. When Tiffany had knocked sharply on his door, he'd frantically minimized the game, straightened his tie, and emerged with an air of profound irritation, as if he were a king disturbed from vital state business. "What seems to be the issue, Tiffany?" he'd asked, pointedly ignoring Eli, addressing his employee as if the man gathering his life's work from the floor were nothing more than a piece of furniture. "This gentleman," Tiffany had said, pausing before the word, loading it with enough disdain to poison the air, "wants to deposit nearly $1 million in small bills." Robert Fletcher finally glanced at Eli, his eyes sweeping over the worn hoodie, the rugged but clearly expensive work boots, and the exhaustion etched around his eyes. He didn't see a successful entrepreneur. He saw a problem standing between him and his 5:15 p.m. tea time. "Has he provided proper identification?" he'd asked Tiffany, still refusing to make eye contact with Eli. "He has an ID," Tiffany replied with a conspiratorial eye roll. "But you know how easy those are to fake these days." 4:52 p.m., 8 minutes until closing. Chloe's follower count hit 300. The comments began to pour in, a digital torrent of outrage. "This is straight-up racism! Call the news! Someone get this on Twitter now! This is so messed up!" Chloe's whispered narration grew more confident. "They're treating this man like a criminal just for having his own money," she told her growing audience. "Like, what kind of twisted sense does that even make? Look at them." Frank, the security guard, had positioned himself behind Eli, his hand now resting uneasily on his radio. At 62, Frank had worked security for 15 years after being laid off from a steel mill. He knew the protocol, but he also knew injustice when he saw it. The customer wasn't shouting, wasn't threatening, wasn't causing a scene. He was just there, on his knees, collecting his scattered fortune with a terrifying, otherworldly composure. "Sir," Frank said, his voice lacking any real conviction, "we're going to need to see some additional identification." Eli straightened up, the last of the bills now organized in a neat stack in his hands. He looked past Frank, his gaze landing on the manager. "What additional identification do you require, beyond a valid state driver's license and the certified articles of incorporation for a legal business deposit?" he asked, his voice still quiet, yet somehow the loudest thing in the room. Robert stepped closer, puffing out his chest. The Patriot Act requires enhanced scrutiny for large cash transactions. We have, anti-money laundering protocols to follow." "I see," Eli said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And what specifically, Robert, appears suspicious about documented revenue from 27 community grocery stores that primarily serve low-income neighborhoods?" Tiffany's voice rose another octave, a shrill beacon of prejudice. "Sir, I cannot and will not process funds from questionable sources. Bank policy states no such thing," Eli interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but it was now laced with something cold and hard as steel. It was the voice of a man who didn't just follow policies but wrote them. Chloe's stream exploded to 700 viewers. Her hushed commentary was electric. "This man is so calm, like it's actually scary calm. If someone threw my money on the ground and called me a drug dealer, I'd be screaming my head off right now." The other customers in the lobby had formed a silent, watching semicircle. Mrs. Gable, there to cash her Social Security check, clutched her purse to her chest. A young couple applying for a car loan whispered nervously to each other. Everyone could sense they were witnessing something monumental, but no one could yet grasp the true scale of the earthquake that was about to hit. Robert glanced at the clock, his panic rising. "Sir, we close in 5 minutes. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your earnings and conduct your business elsewhere." Eli carefully placed the neatly stacked cash back into his briefcase, snapping it shut with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the tense silence. "I understand," he said. "I just need to make one phone call first." "You can make your calls outside," Robert snapped. "We're closed." "This will only take a moment," Eli replied, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. 4:57 p.m. 3 minutes until closing. Eli pulled out his phone. It wasn't a standard iPhone or Android. It was larger, sleeker, with a custom case and a minimalist corporate logo, a stylized V glowing on the lock screen. Chloe frantically tried to zoom in, but the angle was wrong. Robert and Tiffany exchanged a look of pure annoyance. Frank, the security guard, stepped forward again. "Sir, you really need to exit the premises now." Chloe's viewer count hit 1,200. The comment section was a waterfall of text, moving too fast to read, but she caught snippets. "Lawsuit. Viral. Discrimination. Record everything." Eli held up a single finger, a silent request for 30 seconds. The bank fell utterly silent, the only sounds the hum of the fluorescent lights and the relentless tick of the clock on the wall. Tiffany tapped her acrylic nails against the marble counter. Robert checked his watch, his foot jiggling with impatience. Frank's hand was now firmly on his radio. 15 years of building a business, 27 stores serving families in neighborhoods the big chains had abandoned, $950,000 in honest, hard-earned revenue, all of it dismissed because of a hoodie and the color of his skin. But Elias Vance had built more than just grocery stores, and tomorrow, Sterling Trust Bank would learn exactly what and who they had just so violently rejected. 4:58 p.m. 2 minutes until closing. Eli pressed the dial button. The phone speaker was just loud enough for those nearby to hear the conversation, but not clear enough to provide full context. Chloe angled her phone, her live stream now showing 1,500 captivated viewers. "Amelia, it's Eli." A crisp, professional woman's voice responded immediately. "Elias, I wasn't expecting your call. Is everything all right?" "We need to accelerate the timeline on the Sterling Trust acquisition," Eli said, his voice as calm as if he were ordering a coffee. Tiffany's fingers stopped tapping. Robert's eyes narrowed. The word acquisition hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. "The hostile takeover?" Amelia's voice was sharp. "I thought we were waiting until next Thursday's board meeting for final approval." Eli's eyes swept across the lobby, a predator surveying its territory. They settled on Robert's pale, confused face. "Change of circumstances," Eli said. "There's been a material event revealing a profound cultural rot. Execute the hostile takeover protocols immediately. Full asset leverage." 4:59 p.m. 1 minute until closing. Amelia's voice, now crackling with legal authority, came through the speaker. "Elias, that's a significant strategic deviation. It's aggressive. Are you certain?" "Completely certain," Eli replied, his gaze now fixed on Tiffany, who looked as if she'd been slapped. "Profound cultural incompatibility issues have surfaced." Robert stepped forward, his voice cracking with a nervousness he couldn't conceal. "Sir, I think there might be some confusion here." Eli held up his hand, silencing him. "Amelia, I'll call you back in 5 minutes with the final authorization. Get the team ready." He ended the call. The lobby was now so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The only sound was Chloe's breathless whisper to her rapidly growing audience. "Y'all, did he just say hostile takeover? Like he's buying the bank? This is getting so weird." Frank, the security guard, shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. In all his years, he'd seen robberies, arguments, and medical emergencies, but he'd never seen anything like this. Something about Eli's cold, surgical calm felt infinitely more dangerous than any shouting match. 5:00 p.m. Closing time. A soft electronic chime echoed through the bank. Tiffany's computer screen automatically locked as the end-of-day procedures initiated. The chime, normally a cheerful signal of release, sounded today like a funeral bell. "Sir, the bank is now closed," Robert announced, his voice straining for an authority he no longer felt. "You need to leave, immediately." Eli remained perfectly still. "I need 2 more minutes of your time." "You need to leave now," Frank said, his voice carrying the weight of policy, but his heart wasn't in it. Chloe's stream exploded. Comments flew by. "Someone Google Elias Vance Vanguard Capital." "This is about to get crazy." "Oh, snap." Her follower count rocketed past 2,000. She'd never had more than 100 people watch her stream before. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that she was documenting history. The other customers, Mrs. Gable and the young couple, were gathering their things, but no one was actually leaving. They were rooted to the spot, spectators at a drama they didn't understand but couldn't turn away from. "I've never seen anything like this in 40 years of banking here," Mrs. Gable whispered to the couple, her eyes wide. 5:01 p.m. Eli pulled out his phone again, but this time he also reached back into his briefcase. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. He withdrew a heavy, leather-bound portfolio and placed it on the counter, right where his scattered money had been just moments before. Tiffany stared at the portfolio as if it were a bomb. Robert's face had gone from pale to a ghastly shade of gray. Frank took a step closer, but his hand was no longer on his radio. It hung limply at his side, useless. "Amelia, it's Eli again," he said into the phone. "Proceed with the immediate closure due to operational incompatibilities." "Understood," Amelia's voice replied, clear as a bell. "I'll be contacting their board chairman within the hour. Should I cite discriminatory practices in the formal SEC filing?" The question detonated in the lobby. Tiffany's mouth fell open in a silent, horrified, "Oh." Robert grabbed the edge of the counter to keep himself from falling. Chloe nearly dropped her phone. "Document everything," Eli said, "and initiate a full legal review of their hiring practices and employee complaint history. All of it." He ended the call and looked directly at Robert Fletcher. "Now," he said, his voice a soft, deadly whisper, "we can discuss this properly." 5:02 p.m. As if on cue, Robert's personal cell phone buzzed violently in his pocket. Then again. Then it began to ring, a frantic, insistent shriek. The caller ID displayed a name that made Robert's blood run cold. Patricia Crane, board chairwoman. I need to take this, he stammered, backing away toward the false security of his office. Take it here, Robert, Eli suggested, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable command. I think we should all hear this conversation. Something in Eli's tone froze the manager in his tracks. It wasn't a request. It was an instruction delivered with the bone-deep confidence of a man accustomed to absolute obedience. Chloe's camera captured Robert's trembling hand as he swiped to answer, fumbling to activate the speakerphone. Hello, Miss Crane? Robert, what in the goddamn hell is happening at your branch? Patricia Crane's voice was pure ice, a blade of controlled fury. My phone is exploding with calls from the board. Our pre-market stock is plummeting, and I'm getting alerts about some incident going viral on social media. Something about discriminatory practices? Robert's eyes darted wildly between Eli's unmoving face and the phone in his hand. There's been a misunderstanding with a customer, ma'am. Fix it, the voice on the phone snarled. Now, before this becomes a regulatory and shareholder nightmare of epic proportions. The line went dead. 5:03 p.m. Chloe's viewer count hit 2,800. The comments were now a blur, but a few stood out. I found him, LinkedIn, Elias Vance, CEO of Vanguard Capital Holdings. This bank is so screwed, she whispered to her audience, her voice cracking with excitement. Y'all, people in the comments, they're saying this dude owns, like, one of the biggest investment firms in the country. I can't confirm that, but Tiffany's colleague, Brenda, who had been snickering just minutes before, had gone completely silent. She was staring at her computer screen, her face drained of all color. She had been Googling during the commotion, and she'd found something that made her feel physically ill. Tiffany, she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. Tiffany, look at this. But Tiffany couldn't look away from Eli, who had just opened his leather portfolio and was reviewing a thick stack of documents with the methodical precision of a man not begging for service, but evaluating an asset for liquidation. 5:04 p.m. Frank's radio crackled to life. Unit 12, what's your status on the situation at Sterling Trust? We're getting calls. He looked at Eli, then at the melting down Robert, then at the crowd of customers who now refused to leave, their phones all out and recording. The situation was, what was the word? Unprecedented. Surreal. A man had been publicly humiliated for trying to deposit his own money. That same man had just made phone calls about hostile takeovers and SEC filings, and now everyone in the bank looked like they had just seen a ghost. The situation is complex, Frank said into his radio, his voice strained. No immediate physical threat, but what? He had no words for what he was witnessing. I think we might need a supervisor down here. Eli closed his portfolio with a soft, final thud. He stood to his full height for the first time since the confrontation began. And he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a vindictive smile. It was the smile of a scientist who had just confirmed a hypothesis in the most spectacular way imaginable. Actually, Eli said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent marble lobby, I think we have all the supervision we need right here. Chloe's phone showed 3,247 viewers and was climbing by the second. In her excitement, she'd forgotten to whisper. Her voice came out loud and clear. Y'all, I think we're about to find out exactly who this man is. 5:05 p.m. Eli reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. Not from a flimsy wallet, but from a sleek carbon fiber case marked with a single, elegant V. He placed it deliberately on the counter, right in the center of the space where his money had been scattered. The card was thick, heavy stock, the lettering embossed in platinum foil that caught and fractured the fluorescent lights. Chloe zoomed her camera in, her stream now showing 3,800 viewers. Her phone focused, and she read the words aloud, her voice trembling with the magnitude of the revelation. Elias Vance, founder and chief executive officer. Vanguard Capital Holdings. The lobby didn't just go silent. It entered a state of suspended animation. It was the kind of absolute stillness that happens when a dozen human brains simultaneously crash and reboot. Tiffany stared at the card, as if it were written in a language from another dimension. Robert's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out, like a fish gasping for air. Frank's hand fell completely away from his radio, his professional training utterly useless against the reality of the situation. Chloe's voice cracked with dawning, terrifying understanding. "Oh my God," she breathed into her phone. "Y'all, this man doesn't just have money. He owns the money." 5:06 p.m. Eli pulled out a tablet. The device he'd been using earlier wasn't a phone. It was a custom-built military-grade tablet with encrypted corporate applications. He swiped it open, and the screen lit up with a dashboard displaying a dizzying array of financial data in real time. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, VCH Portfolio Overview. Below it, a list of assets scrolled by, 114 branch locations, real estate holdings, tech subsidiaries, and at the very bottom of the screen, highlighted in an ominous, pulsing yellow, Sterling Trust Bank, pending acquisition, $1.2 billion approved. Robert Fletcher saw it first. His knees audibly buckled. He swayed, catching himself on the counter. That's us," he choked out. "That's our bank." Tiffany's voice was a ghost of a whisper. You're buying us?" Eli tilted the tablet so Chloe's camera could capture the screen in perfect, high-definition clarity. Her 3,800 viewers could now see the documented, irrefutable proof of what they'd been frantically guessing in the comments. "Was buying you," Eli corrected, his voice flat and final. Past tense. 5:07 p.m. Robert's phone, which had been momentarily silent, erupted again with a cacophony of calls and texts. The screen lit up with a terrifying list of names: Board Chairman, Regional Director, Chief Compliance Officer. He let them all ring, his brain no longer capable of processing anything beyond the man standing in front of him. "Mr. Vance," Robert stammered, his entire body shaking. "There has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Robert," Eli said, his voice cutting through the manager's pathetic excuses. "Your employee called my legitimate business revenue dope money. She threw nearly $1 million on the floor of your bank and ground her heel into it. You, her manager, supported and validated her actions. This entire interaction has been meticulously documented by—" Eli paused and glanced pointedly at Chloe's phone. Now 4,200 live witnesses. Chloe's comment section was a blur of pure pandemonium. "Holy saw, bank CEO gets discriminated against in his own bank. This is going to be legendary. Tiffany is so fired, Elmau." 4:08 p.m. Tiffany finally found her voice, though it was mangled by shock and terror. "Sir, Mr. Vance, I didn't know." "You didn't know," Eli repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "That's the entire point. You didn't know, so you decided. You made a decision based on my clothes and my skin color. You saw a black man in a hoodie and your brain defaulted to criminality. That assumption, Tiffany, just cost your bank a $1.2 billion acquisition." The number hung in the air, a monstrous 9-figure ghost. It had a physical weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. Tiffany's face went completely white. She looked like she might faint. Robert gripped the counter with both hands, his knuckles turning white. Eli continued, his voice never rising, which somehow made it all the more devastating. But more importantly, your actions revealed a deep institutional bias, a cultural rot, that makes this entire organization fundamentally unsuitable for partnership with Vanguard Capital Holdings. 5:10 p.m. Patricia Crane's voice, now frantic, screamed from Robert's speakerphone, which he'd forgotten was still on. "Robert, are you still there? I'm getting calls from the Wall Street Journal. I need an immediate status update." Eli gestured for Robert to answer. The movement was simple, but it carried the absolute authority of a man used to directing conversations involving nations' GDPs. "Put her on speaker, Robert. This conversation concerns everyone in this room." Robert's hands shook so violently he almost dropped the phone. "Patricia," he croaked, "Mr. Vance is here, in the lobby. The situation has become extremely complex." "Mr. Vance." Patricia's voice was now tight with the controlled panic of a captain whose entire fleet was sinking in real time, all while being broadcast live to the world. "Sir, I want to personally and professionally apologize for any disrespectful treatment you may have received from our staff." "Patricia," Eli said, addressing the phone as if she were in the room, "your apology is noted and has been recorded by our current audience of... let's see." He glanced at Chloe's phone. 100 live witnesses. However, I am significantly more interested in systemic solutions than I am in individual contrition or corporate damage control. 5:12 p.m. Eli opened his portfolio to a specific page marked with red tabs. Your bank's primary credit facility, your wire transfer capabilities, your ATM network, and your electronic payment processing. It all runs through a clearinghouse called Apex Financial Services. Are you familiar with them? Robert nodded slowly, a look of pure, professional dread dawning on his face. "Yes, of course, there are primary..." His voice trailed off as the horrific realization hit him. Eli finished the sentence for him. "Apex Financial Services is a wholly owned subsidiary of Vanguard Capital Holdings. We bought them 18 months ago. We hold your essential credit lines. We process every single one of your wire transfers. We manage your entire ATM network infrastructure. We provide the software for your electronic payment systems. Essentially, Robert, your bank's ability to open its doors tomorrow morning depends entirely on my company's continued cooperation." The mathematical and operational reality of that statement crushed down on everyone present like a physical weight. Tiffany slid down the wall she was leaning against, her designer heels clicking uselessly against the marble. Robert gripped his phone with white-knuckled terror, finally understanding that his bank, his career, his entire professional world existed only at the whim of the man he had allowed his teller to humiliate. Chloe whispered to her 600 viewers, her voice filled with awe. "Y'all, this man doesn't just own banks. He owns the pipes. He owns the infrastructure that makes all the banking in this entire city possible." 5:15 p.m. Eli pulled out a detailed map of the Chicago metropolitan banking network, spreading it across the counter with the care of a general planning a war. Red dots marked Vanguard locations. Blue dots showed their current partner institutions, and yellow dots indicated active acquisition targets. Sterling Trust was a single, isolated blue dot, surrounded by an overwhelming sea of red. "My company owns or controls 47% of the consumer banking infrastructure in this city," Eli explained, his finger tracing lines of connection across the map. "Your institution exists within our ecosystem, Robert, whether your management team realized it or not. Every electronic transaction you process, every wire transfer you send, every ATM withdrawal your customers make, every credit card payment you facilitate. Our systems, our software, Our capital makes it possible." Robert stared at the map as if it were a terminal medical diagnosis. You could shut us down, completely. I could terminate your operational capabilities in less than 12 hours, Eli stated, not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. But that would harm your customers and your innocent employees, the vast majority of whom had absolutely nothing to do with today's incident. I prefer surgical precision over wholesale devastation. 5:18 p.m. Okay, we have to pause here. What would you do in this situation? If you held this much power, would you crush them for the disrespect? Would you walk away and let them crumble? Or would you do what Elias is about to do? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. And if you believe in what we're doing here at Blacktail Stories, telling these stories of justice and empowerment, hit that subscribe button. The most incredible part is still to come. And trust me, you are not going to want to miss the moment this becomes about more than just one bank. Tiffany, her face streaked with tears, finally found the courage to speak, her voice a raw plea. What do you want from us? What would make this right? Eli looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time since he had revealed his identity. His gaze was steady, not cruel, but intensely analytical. I want you to understand, he said, his voice quiet but resonant. I want you to understand that your assumptions today didn't just insult me. They revealed a deep, systemic sickness in this institution, a sickness that affects every single customer who doesn't fit your narrow, prejudiced profile of what a wealthy or legitimate client should look like. He pointed a finger at Chloe, who was still faithfully live streaming, her phone's battery warning now flashing a critical red. This young woman, he said, this student, started documenting everything because she instinctively recognized injustice when she saw it. Over 7,000 people are watching right now because discrimination, in any form, resonates as fundamentally wrong to decent human beings, regardless of who it's happening to. 5:20 p.m. Eli closed his briefcase, but he deliberately left the portfolio of financial documents spread across the counter like exhibits in a courtroom. Here's what happens next, he announced. I'm giving your institution one single opportunity to demonstrate a genuine, measurable, and permanent commitment to systemic change. Robert leaned forward, practically vibrating with desperation, sweat staining the collar of his expensive shirt. Anything. What do you need? Comprehensive training programs? New policies? Complete staff restructuring? We will implement anything you recommend. Not recommend, Robert, Eli corrected him gently. Require. These will be non-negotiable conditions for maintaining your essential operational relationships with all Vanguard Capital Holdings subsidiaries. Patricia Crane's voice crackled through the speakerphone, filled with the exhausted desperation of total surrender. Mr. Vance, we formally accept whatever conditions you wish to establish. Eli smiled for the second time since entering the bank. But this smile was different. It wasn't the cold smile of a scientist. It was the measured smile of a builder. It contained the barest flicker of possibility rather than judgment, a glimmer of hope rather than condemnation. Excellent, he said, because genuine systemic change requires systematic implementation with measurable outcomes, and I have some very specific, non-negotiable requirements that will transform how this institution operates, permanently. He pulled a new document from his briefcase. This wasn't a financial statement. It was a comprehensive reform protocol, professionally bound and titled the Sterling Trust Restoration Mandate. This wasn't spontaneous revenge. This was a calculated, pre-planned instrument of institutional change. Tiffany Astor, Eli said, addressing her directly. Her head snapped up. You are suspended indefinitely, effective immediately, pending a full investigation of your customer interaction patterns over the past 36 months. Before Robert could even nod, His desk phone began ringing, the caller ID showing the regional compliance director. The system was already working. Second requirement, Eli continued, his voice calm and clear. Customer dignity standards. Every teller station and manager's office in every Sterling Trust branch will be equipped with high-fidelity audio and video recording. All interactions with customers conducting transactions over $10,000 will be subject to random monthly review by an independent third-party ethics firm. Tiffany's voice, a mix of shock and desperation, broke through. Video cameras recording us? That seems excessive for a bank. Eli looked at her, his expression unreadable. Tiffany, you threw $950,000 of my money on the floor and called me a piece of trash in front of a lobby full of people. Body cameras seem like basic accountability, not excessive oversight. Chloe whispered to her audience, now numbering over 8,000. Y'all, he came prepared. He had this whole reform plan ready to go. This was never just about making a deposit. This was a stress test, and they failed. Third requirement, Eli announced, flipping the page. Technology integration. My company has developed a proprietary bias detection software. It analyzes interaction patterns, identifies discriminatory treatment by cross-referencing demographic data, and flags disproportionate service delays, fee applications, or security alerts. This software will be installed on every single computer in your entire network. Robert stared at him, dumbfounded. Does a software like that even exist? It does now, Eli replied. We developed it after acquiring 3 other regional banks with similar cultural rot issues. Pattern recognition prevents individual prejudice from becoming institutional policy. Finally, Eli turned to the last page of his reform protocol. Fourth, and most important, the Second Chance Initiative. Tiffany, I'm not interested in ruining your life. I'm interested in reprogramming your perspective. You will participate in a 6-month, company-funded fellowship at a non-profit organization that works with formerly incarcerated individuals seeking to re-enter the workforce. You will learn their stories. You will help them build budgets. You will sit with them, eat with them, and see the full spectrum of their humanity. After that, and only after that, you will spend 1 year speaking at other financial institutions about your experience with unconscious bias and its devastating real-world consequences. He looked at her, his gaze piercing. I am giving you an opportunity to transform a career-ending mistake into a life of meaningful advocacy. People learn far more from a reformed sinner than they do from a perfect saint. The choice is yours. Chloe's camera captured Tiffany's face as tears began to stream down her cheeks. Not tears of shame or fear, but tears of shocked, unexpected relief and the overwhelming possibility of redemption. 5:29 p.m. Eli closed the restoration mandate and returned it to his briefcase. He pulled out the original deposit slip from his transaction an hour earlier, now a lifetime ago. I will return 1 month from today to make my standard business deposit, he said, handing the slip to a trembling Robert Fletcher. Your bank's response on that day will determine whether our professional relationship continues or whether Sterling Trust requires a complete change in management. He then looked directly at Chloe. Thank you, he said simply. Your documentation made this institutional change possible. Individual witnesses can be dismissed or discredited. 8,000 witnesses create a revolution. 5:30 p.m. Eli straightened his hoodie, the very same piece of casual clothing that had triggered the entire confrontation. He picked up his briefcase, ready to leave. Real change happens when preparation meets opportunity, he said to the entire lobby. Today, your discrimination gave me the opportunity I was waiting for to implement systemic reform across an entire banking network. He walked toward the exit, then paused at the door and turned back to Robert. The next customer who walks into this bank wearing a hoodie and carrying a briefcase full of cash. Treat them with the same respect you'd show a man in a $3,000 suit. Not because they might secretly be a billionaire, he said, his eyes finding Chloe's camera one last time, but because they're a human being. Chloe's live stream showed 9,427 viewers as Eli reached the door. Her battery was at 1%, but she managed one final breathless comment for her audience. Y'all, I just watched one man change an entire system without raising his voice, without making a threat, without firing a single shot. This is how you fight. Not with anger, but with intelligence, with evidence, and with a strategy so brilliant they never even see it coming. The marble lobby fell silent as Elias Vance, CEO, reformer, and quiet revolutionary, walked out into the Chicago afternoon, leaving behind him a bank, a career, and a set of policies that would never, ever be the same. This story isn't just about one man's victory, it is a blueprint. It is proof that intelligence, preparation, and dignity are the ultimate weapons against ignorance and hate. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, and if it ultimately gave you hope, then please share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to Blacktail Stories and hit that notification bell, because our mission is to tell the stories that matter. In the comments below, tell us about a time you witnessed an injustice, big or small. Your story matters. Your voice has power. Let's use it together to build a world where everyone is treated with the dignity they are owed. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay prepared, and remember that one person, with one camera, can change everything.